Hi, I'm Gary Liberton. This is my wife, Penny Liberton. Together we run the Udder Alternative Dairy, home of 145 milking goats and 5 burned out bucks. We got into the goat business as something 18 years ago. We started in the goat business as something my wife could do without me here because I was working full time. Well, about 6-8 years into the goat business, my job kept deteriorating, so we just decided to double up on goats, and I quit my job, and that's been 11 years ago. Our farm itself is about 75 acres. We have 60 acres tillable. We raise about 30 acres of our own hay. We do end up buying roughly 3 semi-loads, which would be close to 75 tons a year of a high-quality Western hay, mainly to get the higher production on the milk. We got started in goats. My wife, when we was first married, wanted a goat, and I said, there's no way you're getting a stinking goat. Now we have 145 we milk. Our facilities we have for our milking herd, basically we took about approximately a 65 stanchion cow barn and converted it into the goat housing. Took the stanchions out, put panels up so the goats didn't climb through there, but we left about probably 8 to 10 inch space between two boards where they reach down through to get their hay. We are feeding the hay in front of them where the stanchions where the cows would have ate their grain at one time. We like 25 square foot per goat, but a minimum of 20 square foot is what we like per animal for housing. If you overcrowd them, they don't get up to the feed as good. Feed space wise, you want 1.5 foot of feed space on the bunk per head. So if you have 100 goats, you need 150 feet of feed space. Feeding the hay, we feed it daily, make them clean it up pretty good, clean up the scraps they don't like, and feed fresh stuff daily. Push it up several times a day so they can keep eating it. We also have our yearlings, which would be our first fresheners, are housed separate from our 2-year-olds and up, mainly because we don't have enough space in the dairy barn, and they're in a 40 by 60 shed on the other side of the barnyard. There we have hay available at all times in a hay feeder where we just put a big bale in, and when they get it ate down, we put another big bale in. Kid housing, we start out in 4 by 6 foot pens. Penny does all the kid raising. She's very good at it. The babies are taken away from the doe as soon as they're born. If they're not drinking a bottle of colostrum within the first hour, she is tubing it down them. It is very important to get that colostrum in, get them off on a good start. She'll give them 2 feedings of colostrum, 12 hours apart. Then they get worked onto the bucket feeder, which she can feed 8 at a time. They move out into the kid building, which consists of pens of 6 foot by 4 foot, and we put 8 babies in each pen. Then when it comes feeding time, she pulls them out, feeds the 8 on the bucket, puts them back in the pen, fills the feeder up, moves on to the next one. Once they are weaned, they're moved out into bigger groups like you see behind us. These are all the kids that are probably, I don't know, 4 to 6 months old now, something like that, not quite 6. So that's basically our kid raising program. Then they'll stay out here and they'll be bred out here, and these guys will actually kid out here in this greenhouse building. So, and then they're moved down to the milk herd, and the cycle just keeps going. When we bought the farm, the pipeline was behind the stanchions in the barn. The man that was here before us was trying to get a flat parlor system going. He ran out of money, ended up selling the farm, but the pipeline was in place down the middle of the barn. We just set up a double 12 parlor on 12 on each side of the pipeline and was able to utilize the pipeline that was there. You don't necessarily have to have a pipeline when you start up. You can start with buckets and carry it and run it through a strainer. But now at 145 goats, we're shipping anywhere from 350 to 400,000 pounds of milk a year. That's a lot of weight for us to carry. So it's nice to have that pipeline. The bulk tank, we have an 800-gallon tank. Our cheese factory requires that we have holding capacity for 4 days in the summer and 5 days in the winter. With our herd average and everything, we need an 800-gallon tank to hold the milk for 4 days. My wife should do the talking on our genetics and our the reputation we built because of it and being able to sell breeding bucks. She is very good at picking out all the genetics. When we started this operation, it was going to be her baby to take care of. I'm kind of a take over, take charge kind of guy, so I got to back off and let her run things. She is very good at picking the right breeding bucks, matching the right doe to the buck, knowing which one to keep and call, and all that, so on and so forth. We also DHIA test, not always on a monthly basis. We do like 4 months straight once they freshen, then we do every other month. So we probably run 7, 8 tests a year. But we have numbers on each doe so we know who to keep, who to call. And because of that, we've been able to build our herd up, have records to show to people when they want to buy breeding bucks, what the dam has done, what the Grand Dam has done, Clear Bay back to the one that Jesus blessed, I think you can go back to. So she's got 18 years in her head of genetics that she can rattle off. We don't go for a get rich quick by selling every buck that hits the ground, because not all of them are breeding quality. And because of that, you keep your reputation up and you're always able to sell every year.
This is what I look for in a breeding buck. Milk being one of the top priorities. I like out of hers the DHI test, so I have the records. The doe has produced good doe milking daughters herself, or has bucks. Her buck kids have been good breeders.
Consistency.
Consistency is basically the most important thing. Basically, our herd average, the best we did was...
The best we ever did in the tank,
3 years ago?
Probably 4 to 5 years ago. Everything was perfect. Our hay was perfect, our genetics was perfect, weather was perfect, everything. We hit a 12 3/4 pound average in the tank with everybody freshened.
And that's with a third of the herd being first fresheners.
Right, and we stayed above a 12-pound average that year for 2 months. And I could pull those milk sheets out and show you exactly what week in June it got hot, because then they started dropping off some. This year, we peaked at 11 3/4 pound average, and that was probably in May. And here we are, the middle of July, and we just went under 11 pound average, like a 10.9 on yesterday's pickup. Our goal is always to keep improving on that average, to try and get higher. We kind of hit a figurative glass ceiling because the genetics have not kept up like they have in dairy cattle. But we're hoping all that improves, and we're always looking at improving our feed, improving our genetics, any kind of management technique we can improve on. We've been doing this for 18 years, and you can never get complacent and satisfied. You always want to improve. And even being in it 18 years, we don't have all the answers either. We're still learning too.
One thing too is we do cull very heavy. Usually around 40 of the milkers are changed off, and every year we keep 50 doe kids, 7 extra in case some don't freshen, or
there's a problem.
There's a problem,
They
we
don't
lose
milk.
whatever reason in that. So yeah, our herd, there's about a third of them that are always first fresheners.
We've been in the industry for 18 years. What is some secrets to our success, and how do we keep it fun and exciting? Well, there's some mornings when the feet hit the floor, it is not fun and exciting. But we are our own bosses, which that has a lot to say for anybody that's worked for a jerk for a boss. You know what I'm saying. One thing starting out you don't want to do is go deep in debt. You want to try and maybe do a little harder work by hand rather than having everything fancy right away. And then as you're making money, keep upgrading. We've seen a lot of people get into this scope business thinking it's cute and fun. Don't let anybody kid you. It is work. It is a job, but it's a very rewarding job. Our name is now known in 5 states. We did not set out to be famous, but because of breeding stock and our herd average, and we just set out to do the best job we could. And I have a dairy cow background, and it's like I learned young that production per animal is very important, not a lot of animals. And because of that, we got a high producing herd and are able to sell breeding stock. And that helps sustain an off-farm income, that both of us are able to stay home and not have an off-farm income. So.
And you have to realize too that this is a business. You're milking goats, it's a business. And you have to keep that in mind all the time.
Question is about explain some of our forages and our relative feed values and our mixes and so on and so forth that have helped make high production. We have in the past fed baleage. We always fed 50% dry hay with it. The problem I ran into, the guy guaranteed the baleage would be good, and if there's moldy bales, he would replace them and so on and so forth, which he did. But when I ran into a moldy bale, knowing mold can cause listeria in goats, which causes death, and it's always the high producer because they're under the most stress. I picked every piece of mold there was out of it. Well, that's labor intensive, so I just went back to feeding dry hay. I have found over the years that if you can get dry hay testing 180 to 200 relative feed value, will very much get a response in a good dairy animal out of that high a feed. You can take a goat that's eating 120 relative feed value and say your 200 relative feed value hay costs you $100 a ton more. Figuring at about 7 pounds of intake a day per goat, your goat only needs to have to produce about 1.5 pounds of milk more on that 200 relative feed value hay to pay for the $100 a ton difference. Most good herds will do 2 to 3 pounds more when you put that good hay in front of them. So it is a money maker, even though it looks like it costs a lot of money up front to buy that hay. We always have a balanced grain mixture. Right now we're feeding a pelleted grain, 3 pounds per head per day when they're lactating, 1 pound per day when they're dry for maintenance. Once a baby starts taking grain in, we'll feed them up to 1 pound a day per head every day they're on this farm. Every animal gets 1 pound per head per day. Being in the goat business, you have to be dedicated. You have to be willing to be in the barn when you need to be in the barn. If the Bears and Packers are playing, you need to record it if something's going on in the barn. That's your business. That's your livelihood. That's got to be your number one thing next to your family. So it's very important to run it as a business and to be down there taking care of business. Good hired help can be hard to come by. Don't let them make major decisions that you need to be there doing.